The alarm was screaming. Red lights flashed across the hallway of Station Arkosny, bathing the cold steel walls in blood-colored pulses. Security officers were yelling, drawing stun rifles, sprinting toward Containment Sector 12. Something had gone horribly wrong. Inside the surveillance room, Commander Vex's claws scraped the metal table as she watched the live feed. For predator cubs each the size of a small human were loose. One camera showed a technician lying in a pool of blood, unmoving. Another showed the cubs ripping open a wall panel like it was paper. "Seal off the lower deck," Vexa growled. "No one goes near them. No one. But down on the deck." Someone already had. A human. Dr. Mara Miles stood alone, cornered at the end of a corridor. 4 predator cubs growled in front of her, muscles tense, eyes glowing with primal hunger. Their fur was dark, wet with blood. Their mouths opened slightly, revealing rows of jagged teeth. The security feed zoomed in. "She's dead," someone whispered. But the cubs didn't pounce. They stopped. One sniffed the air. Another took a cautious step forward, head tilted. Mara didn't move. She didn't scream. She didn't raise her arms. She just knelt down slowly, her eyes soft, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay," she said gently. "You're scared, I know." And to the horror of everyone watching, largest cub stepped closer and licked her hand. Main story begins 2 days earlier. Miles hated long flights. Her legs were sore, her back ached, and her nerves were already on edge when she finally stepped off the transport ship and into the freezing corridors of Station Arkosny. A massive alien outpost hidden deep in neutral space, Arkosny was where the galaxy kept its most dangerous biological samples, including predator species too deadly to be allowed on any planet. And now, apparently, was also where they dumped her. She was the first human scientist assigned to the Predator Juvenile Observation Program. No one explained why. Probably because no one else wanted the job. The head of research, a crusty, gray-feathered Thalen named Drick, looked her up and down with clear disgust. "You were sent here for what?" he asked coldly. "Behavioral study," Mara replied. "Specifically early-stage social development," Drick scoffed. "They are not pets. Human. They are weapons. Born killers. Every species starts somewhere," she said, calm. "Even humans were monsters once." Drick rolled his eyes. "Fine. You want to observe them? You get 2 hours. Behind a triple-layered barrier. And if you so much as blink wrong, don't expect us to rescue you." The observation room was cold and dark, separated from the enclosure by reinforced transparent walls. Inside the habitat, 4 predator cubs lounged on rocks and metal platforms. Their fur shimmered with strange patterns. Their claws were already long, their jaws could crush bone, and yet Mara saw something else. The smallest cub tried to approach the larger one, only to get pushed away. It didn't fight back. It sulked. The largest paced restlessly, sniffing the corners like it was looking for something, maybe an escape. They weren't mindless. They were learning, reacting, watching. On her second visit, Mara brought a small tool, a scent tracker with pheromone data. She sprayed a harmless compound into the vent system, one that mimicked a calming hormone found in human infants. The result? The cubs immediately slowed down. Their ears twitched, aggression levels dropped. It was only the beginning. But Mara knew what she saw: potential. On the 3rd day, the power grid flickered. A routine system reset was scheduled. Nothing serious. Standard protocol. But someone forgot to rearm the backup locks on the Predator enclosure. At 3:27 station time, the cage opened. The cubs walked out. The first victim was a junior technician. He never saw it coming. Was a Krau soldier, ripped apart before he could fire his weapon. By the time the alarm went off, the cubs were already on the move. Chaos erupted across a Harcus-9. And in the middle of it all, Mara Miles was trapped. She had been on her way to the lab, unaware of the breach, when the lights died and the alarms shrieked to life. Her comlink buzzed with orders. "Lock down your section, predators. Loose don't engage. Seek shelter." But it was too late. She turned a corner and froze. 4 sets of glowing yellow eyes stared at her from down the hallway. They were beautiful, terrifying, bloody, and they were walking straight toward her. The standoff, she had seconds, maybe less, but Mara didn't scream. She didn't run. Instead, she slowly lowered herself to the floor, eyes locked with the lead cub. "I remember you," she whispered. "You're the one who tried to share your food?" The cub stopped. Its nostrils flared. Mara slowly opened her pack, pulled out a small silver pouch, and placed it on the floor. Emergency rations smelled sweet. The cub sniffed the air again, then padded forward. Carefully, the others watched, tense. But they didn't attack. The lead cub took the pouch in its mouth and backed away, one by one. The others followed. A miracle, a mystery, a connection. When security finally arrived, rifles raised. Mara stood with her hands raised, not in fear, but in protection. "Do not fire," she said firmly. "They're not attacking." The cub stood behind her, alert but calm. One officer nearly fired anyway, but the largest cub growled, and everyone froze. Mara turned slowly. "They trust me," she said. "Let me prove it." Commander Vexa watched the footage again and again. She knelt in front of 4 blood-covered predator cubs, she muttered, and they followed her. The council demanded answers. Drick insisted on immediate termination of the cubs. "They've tasted blood," he hissed. "They will never be tame." But Mara refused. "There's more to them," she said. "They're not weapons. Not yet. Not if we give them another path." "You're not a soldier," Vexa warned. "You're a civilian. What makes you think you're in control?" Mara looked her in the eye. "I'm not in control. I earned their trust. That's stronger than control." That night, Mara returned to the enclosure. Now under heavy lockdown, the cubs were locked inside again. Watching her through the reinforced window, she placed her hand on the glass. The lead cub walked over, and placed its paw exactly where hers rested. The cameras recorded everything, and in that quiet moment, cross-species, through instinct and blood and fear, a bond was born. One the galaxy would never forget. "Surveillance room Arcos 9, rewind that," Commander Vexa ordered. Her voice was sharp, cold. The air in the room felt heavy with tension. The footage on the screen rewound. 4 predator cubs, coated in blood, stalked toward the human scientist, Dr. Mara Miles. She was alone, unarmed, trapped. Everyone watching expected a massacre, but instead of leaping, the cubs paused. Then the largest cub, Unit K4, stepped forward and nudged her hand. It could have torn her arm off. Instead, it licked her fingers. "Play it again," Vexa whispered. They watched for the 6th time, same moment. Same mystery. For apex predators, one human. And somehow, she'd survived. Not just survived. They followed her. Hours. Later, Medical Bamara sat on a steel bed as a medic scanned her vitals. Her body was fine, her mind overloaded. She kept replaying. The moment in her head, how their eyes had softened, how the cubs had sniffed her, how they'd protected her when the guards arrived. Nothing about it made sense. No one at Arcosnum believed it. "You fed them something," Drick spat. "You used a chemical to pacify them." "No drugs," Mara said calmly. "They recognized me." "Recognized you? As what, their new alpha?" He sneered. Mara didn't answer, because deep down, she wasn't sure either. The alien High Council of Arcosni, made up of multiple species, gathered to discuss the incident. In their eyes, the cubs' behavior was an immediate threat not just to the station, but to galactic security. Predator species were never meant to bond with handlers. They were meant to be studied, contained, controlled. Her presence is altered. Their instincts, one counselor barked. "They see her as part of the pack," another said. Vexa stood and folded her arms. "So we kill the cubs now, or we wait for them to turn on her?" Mara entered the chamber. She'd heard enough. "You're all afraid," she said. "I understand that. But don't let fear destroy something we haven't even begun to understand." Drick laughed. What would a human know about taming monsters? Mara turned slowly, eyes locked on him. I come from a world full of monsters, she said. We learned how to change. Despite the council's warnings, Mara was allowed one more session with the cubs, this time under full observation. Armed guards lined the walls. Turrets hung from the ceiling. Cubs were already inside, pacing restlessly. As soon as Mara entered the enclosure, everything changed. The pacing stopped. Growling faded. They ran to her. The smallest cub brushed against her leg like a cat. The largest stood beside her like a bodyguard. She's bonded with them, Vexa whispered into her cums. Or brainwashed them, Drick hissed. The guards kept their fingers near the triggers, but the cubs just sat beside Mara, quietly, protectively, over. The next few days, Mara began to study their behavior more closely. She didn't use cages, no chains, no fear. Just calm movements, consistent responses, and basic communication techniques. Tapping. Nodding eye contact, she noticed something strange. Whenever she showed signs of pain rubbing her shoulder, limping, the cubs would react. They'd whimper. One even brought her a blanket once. It wasn't normal. It was empathy. They're learning from you. Dr. Tash, a Ziran psychologist, told her. They're mirroring your emotions. It means they're more than just killers, Mara replied there. Children, not everyone was happy. Station broadcasts filled with rumors. Human causes predator outbreak. Cubs being weaponized. Human using cubs to gain influence. Even some humans on the station wanted her removed. You're playing with fire, her supervisor warned. I'm trying to show it can be tamed, she said. Then one night, someone left a message on her door, painted in red. You'll be next. Later that same night, Mara was working late in her lab. She didn't hear the attacker come in. A flash of metal. A knife, she screamed, and a wall exploded. Beside her. The predator cubs had broken through it. They tore into the attacker without hesitation. He barely survived. When security arrived, they found Mara on the floor, shaking. With the cubs surrounding her like wolves protecting their den. Blood was everywhere, but none of it was hers. You see now, Vexa said? They're too dangerous. They respond to threats with violence. They responded to my threat, Mara said. They didn't attack anyone else. They saved me. Drick stood. Enough. You're animals, not soldiers. End this. But the council hesitated. For the first time. They weren't sure. She stood before the council the next day, exhausted but unshaken. You all think I'm just a human who got lucky, she said. But luck doesn't make a predator risk. It's life for you, she paused. They're still young. They still have instincts. But so do we. The question is, do we feed fear? Or something better? Silence followed, then slowly Vexa spoke. We will give you time. But one more incident, one wrong move, I understand, Mara said. Just give him a chance. In the dark. Of night, Mara sat outside the enclosure watching the cubs sleep. For a moment, they looked peaceful, gentle. One of them stirred and padded over to her. It pressed its head against the glass wall. Mara smiled and did the same. A soft sound filled the air. A purring noise. She didn't know predator cubs could purr, but now she did. And that sound said everything. They weren't killers tonight. They were just young hearts, finally feeling safe. The lights flickered again. Mara sat alone in the genetics lab, staring at the holographic DNA sequence floating above her desk. Her hands trembled. She zoomed in. Once, twice, 3 times. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The predator. CUB Sapex creatures bred to kill had a gene cluster buried deep in their DNA. It wasn't just rare. It was impossible. This gene didn't belong to their species. It was a mirror of something found in one place only. Humans. The door behind her hissed open. Drick entered. Cold, suspicious. What are you doing, human? Mara hesitated. If she told him, he would bury it. Twist it. Maybe even destroy it. But she couldn't hide it forever. Because if she was right, then these predator cubs weren't just monsters. They were engineered. 3 days earlier, after the attack in the lab, Mara had been confined to her quarters for safety. The cubs were moved back to their high-security enclosure. Armed guards watched them around the clock. But Mara didn't rest. She couldn't. She needed answers. Why had the cubs bonded with her? Why only her? Why did they show signs of empathy? Something predators weren't supposed to understand. That's when she remembered something strange the smallest cub had once. Mimicked her actions, exactly tapping its claws on the glass, the same rhythm she used when bored. At first she thought it was coincidence. Now, she wasn't so sure. Before her confinement, Mara had managed to collect a blood sample from the largest cub K4 during a minor injury check. She hadn't been allowed to run full tests yet, until now. She contacted Dr. Tash, the Zarin psychologist who had quietly supported her. "I need access to a DNA sequencer," she said. "That's off limits," Tash replied. "I won't ask again." Pause then. "It's in Lab 3. Midnight. You have 1 hour." Under low light and in total silence, Mara ran the sample through the station's high-grade genome scanner. At first, it looked normal complex, dense, with strong predator traits. But then she saw it. A strange sequence embedded in the emotional regulation region of the genome. Looked eerily familiar. She ran a cross-species comparison, and her breath caught human gene code. Specifically OXTR7R, the empathy receptor. This receptor was critical in human emotional bonding, parent to child, friend to friend. It didn't exist naturally in any of the predator species, but here it was, in the cubs. Inactive, but present. Tash entered as the final results finished compiling. "What did you find?" he asked softly. Mara pointed at the screen. "Look, Tash. Studied the data for a long time. This is engineered," he finally said. "These cubs were altered. Genetically modified," Mara whispered. "But why?" "To bond. To obey. To ... connect." Tash stepped back. "Do you know what this means?" Mara nodded. They weren't created to be monsters. They were designed to be tools. Tools for someone's war. Digging deeper, Mara broke through a locked partition in the genetic data, something hidden. Buried beneath code layers, inside was a faded identifier. Someone used human DNA to design these predators. She said in shock. "But who?" Tash asked. Mara stared at the screen, eyes wide. "Not who? Which species?" The lab lights flashed. Security. Override. Unauthorized access detected. Someone knew what they were doing. The doors sealed. Mara and Tash were trapped. A voice crackled over the speaker. "You've seen enough." Suddenly, the lights shut off completely. Using a manual override panel, Tash forced open the back maintenance hatch. Mara grabbed the data core and slipped through just before the emergency doors slammed shut. They ran through the service tunnels, chased by distant footsteps. "They're trying to erase the files," Tash warned. "Let them try," Mara said, holding the backup drive tight. "I've got the truth right here." Mara locked her door, turned off every network sensor, and opened the core. She reread the file line by line. It all made sense now. The predator cubs were part of an abandoned military program. Goal: create bioweapons that could follow orders, form loyalty bonds, and be deployed with minimal handlers. But something had gone wrong. The cubs weren't supposed to form emotional bonds. They weren't supposed to choose someone, but they had chosen her. Word had spread fast. Unauthorized lab. Breach. Data theft. Security panic. VAXA was furious. "Who helped the human get into the lab?" she barked. "Who is leaking classified research?" Drick sat calmly. Too calmly, but Mara wasn't afraid anymore. She stepped into the chamber, holding the drive in her hand. "You don't have to tell me who started Project Vindicator," she said. "I already know." She placed the drive on the table. The council went silent as the data opened. Some gasped, some cursed. Others just stared in horror. You spliced predator DNA with human empathy sequences, Mara said. You thought you could control it. But you didn't test for what would happen if the bond became real. They're weapons, Drick hissed. That was the point. No, Mara said, shaking her head. Now, they're more than that. You made something new, something alive. And now you want to kill them because they're not following your plan. You're risking every life on this station. No, she said, voice calm but steady. You did that the moment you played God and buried the truth. That night, Mara returned to the observation room. She stood behind the glass. The cubs looked up at her. This time, she didn't just see wild animals. She saw 4 young beings, made by fear, but now growing because of hope. She whispered through the glass, I know where you came from now. The largest cub blinked, tilted its head and came closer, and Mara made a quiet vow. I won't let them erase you. Don't do it, Vexa warned. They'll kill you. Mara stood inside the training dome, unarmed. 4 predator cubs stared at her from across the open room, their eyes sharp, bodies tense. Security officers aimed stun rifles from the observation deck above. Drick scoffed. This is madness. She thinks she can command them. Mara raised her hand. Sit, she said firmly. No one moved. Then the largest cub K4 lowered its body slowly and sat. Silence filled the dome. One by one, the others followed. The guards gripped their rifles tighter. The council watched, stunned, and Mara, she just smiled. A risky proposal after revealing the truth about Project Vindicator, Mara knew the pressure would only grow. The council allowed the cubs to live for now, but insisted they remain under observation. Mara had a better idea. Let me train them, she said. You want to, what? Vexa snapped. They have empathy. They respond to my voice. They follow me. What if we took that further? Drick scoffed. They're not pets. No, Mara agreed. They're intelligent. If we treat them like monsters, they'll become monsters. But if we treat them like students, maybe they'll become more. The training dome, the council reluctantly agreed to attest 1 week of supervised training. If the cubs failed or acted aggressively, the program would be shut down permanently. Mara had no illusions. This was her only shot. The training dome was massive, round, and cold. It had once been used to train military drones. Now it was reprogrammed. For 4 predator cubs and a single human, security insisted on 2 things. Full surveillance. A dead man's switch in Mara's pocket. Press it. The dome fills with knockout gas. She accepted both. She didn't plan on using them. Day. The command in chaos. The first day was chaos. The cubs didn't understand commands. They chased each other, roared, even tried to climb the observation wall. But every time Mara called their names, they stopped and looked at her. That was something. Mara kept her commands simple. Sit, stay back. She used food rewards, firm gestures, repetition. No shouting, no force. By the end of the day, 2 cubs could sit on command. The others watched and learned. Nightfall later that night. Mara sat outside the enclosure. I don't know if this will work, she whispered. But I know you're trying. The largest cub, K4, pressed its paw to the glass again. She did the same. They stayed like that for a long time. Day 3. Progress and doubtward. Of the training spread through a cause-9, some called her foolish, others watched in secret. When Mara commanded K3 to stay still during a mock threat, he obeyed. Even as a drone buzzed in his face. That's not normal, Dr. Tash whispered, watching the footage. No, Vexa agreed, watching too. It's remarkable. But Drick was unimpressed. This is performance, nothing more. Wait until they get hungry. Day 5. The first test, the council set up a test. A human volunteer unarmed was placed in the dome while Mara stood by. The cubs were released. Cameras rolled, guards held their breath. The volunteer looked terrified. Mara called out, "Hold!" The cubs froze. K2 sniffed the air. Curious, K4 stood between the human and the others. Mara stepped forward. They're waiting for permission, she said. Prove it, Vexa said coldly. Mara nodded. Approach. The cubs walked slowly toward. The volunteer sniffed, touched, stopped. No aggression. No attack. Just curiosity. Call them back, Vexa ordered. Mara snapped her fingers. Here, and just like that, they returned. Behind closed doors, Drick met privately with a shadowy counselor that night. If she succeeds, this becomes a problem, the counselor said. She's already a problem, Drick replied. We need an accident. Drick nodded. I'll arrange it. Day 6. Sabotage during the next training session. One of the drone dummies malfunctioned. Instead of moving slowly, it launched a high-speed threat simulation directly at Mara. The cubs reacted in an instant. K1 tackled the drone midair, smashing it into the wall. K4 positioned itself in front of Mara. She didn't get hurt, but she saw the flicker in the control room. Someone had triggered the override. Confrontation later. In private, she confronted Drick. You tried to kill me, she said. Prove it, he smiled. She couldn't, not yet, but the cubs had proven more than loyalty. They'd proven instinctive protection, and Mara knew. They were ready. Day 7. The cubs stood in formation. Mara gave a silent hand signal. They moved together silent. Focused, precise, guards watched in disbelief. Dr. Tash whispered, they're syncing with her. Mara approached K4 and touched its shoulder. You're not weapons, she said softly. You're my team now. From the viewing deck, Vexa watched quietly. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked thoughtful. Then she said, under her breath, what have we created? They were screaming in the hallway. Mara dropped her datapad. Alarms blared. She ran. She didn't care about rules. Didn't care about clearance levels. She ran straight for the predator cubs. Closure. Security guards stood frozen outside. The viewing glass was fogged up. Red lights flashed. Inside, she saw chaos. One of the cubs' K3 was convulsing on. The floor foam around its mouth. The others circled it, snarling, not at the cub, at something behind the feeding hatch. Then Mara saw it. The meal tray, someone had poisoned them. She slammed her hand on the glass, screaming, open the door. They didn't listen, so she did something worse. She pulled her emergency override, badge, and opened the cage herself. Hours earlier, a normal morning Mara had finally allowed herself to relax a little. After a week of training, the predator cubs were responding better than anyone expected. They followed commands, even began recognizing basic spoken words, food, safe, friend. Today's session was canceled, so Mara focused on paperwork. The cubs were due for feeding and rest. She watched them on the surveillance screen. Looked content. Everything seemed fine, till the screaming started. The poison by the time she reached the enclosure. K3 was dying. The other 3 cubs, especially K4, were furious, roaring and clawing at the walls. Their protective instinct had triggered. They didn't know what had happened, but they knew it was wrong. Mara used the override badge granted to her by Vexa after the successful training trial. Alarms wailed as the outer gate slid open. Security. Officers tried to stop her, but it was too late. She was already inside. K4 growled at first, till he saw her kneel beside K3. Help me, merged, and the growling stopped. Emergency response. Mara injected a stim shot into K3's neck. It wasn't a cure, but it would keep the cub alive long enough for the antidote. Dr. Tash arrived with a crash kit, sliding under the security door just before it shut. Together, they worked quickly. K3's breathing slowed. Its eyes flickered. Then finally it relaxed. Still alive? Barely. The council was notified immediately. Investigation. Begins. Commander Vexa wasted no time. Someone poisoned the feeding line, she growled. This was no accident. Drick tried to act surprised. Are we sure it wasn't a reaction? The food was laced with a Class 7 neurotoxin, Vexa snapped. We found the compound still active. Everyone in the room fell silent. Class 7 was restricted, military use only. Someone had tried to assassinate the cubs. Backlash. The station exploded with rumors. Someone wants them dead. Cubs are too dangerous. This is what happens when you keep predators in cages. Mara didn't speak at the council meeting. She didn't need to. The footage spoke for her. The cubs hadn't attacked her. They'd let her save their sibling. They'd even stepped back as medics entered. They understood what was happening. The saboturtle that night, Tash handed her a tablet. This was scrubbed from the public records, but I recovered it from the internal logs. It showed a technician face half-covered, slipping something into the feeding line during a scheduled maintenance shift. Mara paused the footage. It wasn't just any technician. It was one of Drick's personal lab aides. The confrontation, she stormed into Drick's lab. He didn't look surprised. "You endangered for living beings," she said, "and me?" "They're not beings," he replied coolly. "They're broken weapons. They're children. They're threats. Saved my life, and they'll take others." Drick stepped closer. "You're making them soft. Softness won't save you when they grow up." Mara stared him down. "You're wrong. They're learning how to protect, how to trust. And you're afraid of that." He said nothing. But his eyes said everything. The vote new vote was called. Shut down the Predator Project. I'll let it continue under stricter controls. Some wanted the cubs put into stasis. Others argued for relocation. Mara had one last chance to speak. "I didn't create them," she said, "but I've watched them grow. I've seen them comfort each other. I've seen them risk themselves to save one of their own." She paused. "I've watched humans act worse than they do." Silenced. Then -VXA stood. "I vote to let the project continue." Eyes widened. "I've seen how they look at her," Vexa continued. "That isn't hunger. That's loyalty." The vote passed. Barely rebuilding, Trust K3 took 2 days to fully recover. The other cubs never left its side. They brought it food, kept it warm, licked its fur gently. When Mara returned, K4 ran to her and leaned against her leg. She knelt down, voice soft. "I won't let them hurt you again." Behind her, guards stood ready, but none of them dared raise their weapons because the cubs were watching, and this time they weren't afraid. In her private logs that night, Mara recorded a final message. "I've been afraid every day since. I came to this station, but not because of the cubs. I'm afraid of the people who refuse to see change, even when it's right in front of them." She looked out the window at the stars. They were made to be weapons, but they've become more. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. Mara stepped into her quarters, the door hissing shut behind her. She placed her datapad on the table, rubbed her tired eyes. Then snap. A sound from behind her. She turned. A masked figure lunged from the shadows. With a shock blade aimed at her chest, she screamed. But the attacker never reached her. The window behind them shattered in an instant. A blur of fur and fury exploded into the room. K4 hit the assassin like a meteor. The attacker flew backward, slammed into the wall, and dropped the blade. 3 more cubs swarmed in through the broken glass. Teeth bared, eyes glowing. Growls that shook the floor. Mara pressed her back to the wall, heart pounding. She wasn't their target. The assassin was. He begged, cried, tried to crawl away. The cubs circled, silent, deadly, and then K4 looked. At Mara. Waiting. The threat grows after the failed poisoning. Tensions across Arkosnan rose fast. Mara's project was under constant watch. Guards tracked her every move. The cubs were monitored 24/7, but someone still wanted her gone. And this time, they came with a blade. Earlier, the Dotha cubs had shown signs of learning advanced, especially K4. During a private training session, Mara had taught them a new command: protect. She demonstrated it slowly. Hold your ground. Stand between threat and target. Wait. K4 understood first, then the others followed. They were still young, but their instincts were sharpening. Not just to attack, but to choose when not to. The attack Mara had no warning. The assassin had access likely disguised as maintenance. He waited inside her quarters for over an hour. His orders were clear: end the human kill the project. He didn't. No, K4 had begun patrolling near her, a room on its own. He didn't know the cubs had started to listen without being told. They broke in through the air ducts. Tracking his scent, K4 struck first. The others didn't kill him, but they made sure he'd never forget who he'd tried to hurt. Security response alarms blared. Dozens of armed guards flooded the hallway. They found Mara shaken but unharmed. The assassin was still alive, barely. The cubs stood over him, silent and still, just waiting for Mara's signal. "Stand down," she whispered. They stepped back instantly. Everyone watching froze. They had obeyed her. No blood frenzy. No loss of control, just precision, loyalty, discipline. Backlash news spread like wildfire. Predator cubs attack armed assassin to save human caretaker? Are they soldiers now? Have they imprinted too far? Trick used the event as proof that the cubs were now dangerously attached to Mara. "They're becoming her personal bodyguards," he hissed. "She's losing control." Vexa disagreed. They followed her command. They spared the attacker. That's not loss of control. That's a team. Mara's defense at an emergency meeting. Mara explained everything. "I never taught them to kill," she said. "I taught them to defend. They made the choice to protect, not destroy." Dr. Tash backed her up. "These cubs aren't just reacting anymore. They're planning, waiting, choosing." The council was divided. Some were amazed. Others were terrified. The vote was split again. Quiet moments later, in the cubs' private rest zone, Mara sat cross-legged while the four of them slept around her. She whispered into her datapad log. "They're growing up faster than anyone expected, and I think they see me as more than just a leader now." K4 stirred, resting its head gently on her lap. She smiled. "Maybe they see me as family." The assassin talks under interrogation. The assassin confessed he was paid in untraceable credits. His orders were clear. Silence the human. Blame it on the cubs. Someone wanted this project destroyed and wanted it to look like a failure. Vexa was furious. "They're trying to start a war between species." Mara nodded. "Because if humans and predators can bond, what else is possible?" Repercussions. Council now faced a deeper question. If predator cubs could be trained, if they could feel loyalty, if they could choose not to kill, what did that mean for future interspecies relationships? Mara gave them an answer they didn't expect. "Maybe they were made for war," she said. "That doesn't mean they have to be used for it." That night, Mara stood on the observation deck overlooking the stars. The cubs sat beside her, calm and quiet. She reached out, gently rubbing K4's head. He purred behind her. Approached. "Stop, right?" The alien commander said. "There will be more attempts. More lies, more fear." Mara nodded. "I know. And you'll keep defending them?" "They'd do the same for me." Exa stared at the cubs, then gave a small nod. "We may need them sooner than you think." Far off in deep space, an unknown fleet entered the edge of Arcosnine's star system, unmarked. Silent. Watching it came from the black, no signals. No ID, no response. Just a massive dark shape sliding silently toward. ARKOS-9. The station's scanners caught it too late. Unidentified object approaching at low velocity. Commander Vexa stood over the command table, watching the screen. "Is it military?" she asked. "Unknown. It's not in any registry." Inside the predator enclosure, the cubs lifted their heads all at once. Every one of them stared at the ceiling. Their fur bristled. Their bodies tin. Mara froze. She had never heard that kind of growl before. It wasn't warning. It was hate, and the ship parked itself just beyond sensor range. No communication. No movement. Just silence. Vexa ordered. Long-range scans. Tosh ran biological sweeps. The AI tried to hail it 10 times. Nothing. Double quotes. "Who sits just outside visual range without saying a word?" Mara asked. No one answered. The cubs react. The cubs didn't eat. didn't sleep. They paced, watched the walls, sniffed the air. When Mara entered the enclosure, K3 blocked her path. She tried to comfort him, but he wouldn't let her pass. They sensed something, Tash said quietly. K4 had climbed to the top of the enclosure wall and stared straight at the station's hull that like it knew what was out there. They're afraid, Mara whispered. No, Tash corrected. They're preparing. False diplomacy. 12 hours after the ship's arrival, a message finally came. A simple one, requesting to dock for negotiation. Vexa and the council debated for hours. Some believed it was just a lost ship. Others feared a trap. But political pressure forced a choice. They opened docking bay 3. A small landing craft descended. 3 figures exited tall, cloaked, faces hidden. Their movements were smooth. Too smooth, not even scanners could get a clear biological reading. The lie they introduced themselves as observers from a neutral research guild, but they had no credentials, no matching flight path, and no faces. Vexa pressed them. They deflected. Tash asked scientific questions. They gave false answers. Mara said nothing. But the cubs didn't stop growling the whole time. K4 even bit into the steel bars of the enclosure until his gums bled. Something about those visitors wasn't just wrong, it was deeply unnatural. The real identity Tash ran a back-channel scan. The ship's hull matched no known species, but the interior scans detected trace DNA signatures. They were a perfect match. To the predator cubs, Tash stared at the screen. They're the ones who created them, he whispered. Betrayal revealed the observers requested access to study the specimens, claiming peaceful intent. They said they wanted to understand the cubs' progress. The council debated. Derrick pushed hard for acceptance, but Mara exploded. No. You don't give children back to the monsters who made them. Tosh slammed down his datapad. They're not observers. They're engineers. Genetic engineers. The council paused, but it was too late. The visitors had already begun moving through the lower levels, and one of the cubs, K2, was missing. The rescue on. Alarm screamed from sublevel 6. Mara didn't wait for permission. She took her stun pistol and ran. The other 3 cubs followed her without command. Without fear, security tried to block them. K4 rammed through the doors they found. K2 in a containment pod. One of the observers stood over him, attaching a tracker to its neck. Mara fired a warning shot. You're not taking them. The alien turned slowly. Its face melted away, revealing dark, oily skin. Eyes that shimmered like wet glass. I made them, it hissed. They belong to me. No, Mara said. They don't. Behind her, the cubs leaped. The fight was fast. Brutal. One dash-sided. The alien was strong, but not prepared. The cubs didn't kill. They simply destroyed its armor, tore away its mask, shattered the containment unit, and freed K2 by the time Vex's team arrived. Alien was unconscious and the ship had powered up for escape. But the cubs were already waiting in the docking bay. The escape Mara shouted into the cums. Don't shoot. They're running. Let them. Vexa hesitated and nodded. The alien ship turned away and vanished into deep space, leaving no trace. But the message was clear. They would return. Later that night, Mara sat in the cub's room, wrapping K2's paw where the tracker had burned into his skin. K4 sat beside her, eyes locked on the stars. They didn't speak, Mara whispered, because they didn't need to. They already thought they owned you. K4 growled again, quiet, cold. Mara reached out and touched his cheek. No one owns you, not anymore. Then the emergency lights flickered, and a new alert buzzed across the station. Unidentified fleet entering system. The lights went red. Emergency sirens screamed through a RKOS-9 from the outer defense grid. Vexa shouted over comes their back, and they're not hiding this time. 50 ships, no markings. It's just pure silent aggression. The enemy fleet drifted into orbit and began powering their weapons. down in the predator enclosure. The 4 young cubs stood alert, growling. K4 bared his teeth and looked to Mara. She understood. Immediately, this wasn't fear, this was readiness. "They're coming for us," she whispered. The cubs didn't blink. K4 stepped forward and pressed his forehead to hers, and that's when she knew. They were ready to defend everyone. The invasion begins. The alien creators had returned. This time they didn't want study. They didn't want negotiation. They wanted the cubs back, and anyone who got in the way, eliminated. Their message was simple: return what is ours, or be destroyed. The council breaks. The Arcos 9 council collapse into chaos. Some wanted to surrender. The cubs, others demanded war. Dutrick, red-faced, slammed the table. "We can't fight this. We'll all die for a science project." Mara stood. "They are not a project. They are lives. They are my family. They are willing to stand with us." Silence followed. Then Vexa growled. "If they fight, we fight," the cub Plantash revealed. Something new. The cubs weren't just born for combat. They were designed to interface with alien tech. He showed how their claws emitted trace harmonics that could disrupt cloaking systems. "They don't just fight," he said. "They break the enemy's tools." Mara looked at the cubs. "Will you help us?" They didn't speak, but they all stepped forward, one by one. Defense of Arcos 9 as enemy ships launched their first wave of boarding pods. Arcos 9 went into lockdown, but the creators didn't expect the cubs. K1 and K2 ambushed the first landing party in the airlock corridors, moving as one. Silent and swift. K3 climbed the ventilation shafts and knocked out a power relay, frying the enemy drones inside. And K4? He led a direct assault on the command bridge of the boarding vessel, backed by Mara, the team of Arcos 9 Marines. They didn't fight like animals, they fought like a unit. Precise, coordinated, relentless. The turning point mid-battle. Pinned behind a fallen bulkhead, an alien soldier raised its weapon. K4 leaped between them, took the hitman, got back up, burned, bleeding. But he kept going. He tackled the alien and broke its weapon. Then looked at Mara, the tail swaying, still standing still. Protecting the creator ship falls with the help of the Cubs' interference ability. Arcos 9's main cannon got a clean shot at the flagship's cloaking field. One blast, one hit. The flagship began to fall back, pulling the rest of the fleet with it. The invasion ended not because the station outgunned them, but because the enemy saw something they hadn't expected. Resistance with heart. They left. For now, but they would remember, and so would everyone else. Aftermath: the station was damaged but alive. Many were injured, but not dead. Mara sat beside K4 in the medbay, wrapping his wounded paw. "You saved me," she said softly. He licked her hand once, then laid his head in her lap. News of the Cubs' actions spread across 10 systems. Species who once feared Predator, its offspring now asked to learn more. Could they be protectors too? Could they be heroes? A few weeks later, Arcos 9 reopened to the public. The Cubs stood beside Mara as part of a new peace protection unit, trusted and ready. Children from other planets stared up at them in awe. Are those the ones who fought the alien invaders? Mara smiled and nodded. They are. K4 looked up at the sky, scanning the stars. He growled quietly, but not in anger. And promise, if the creators ever came back, they wouldn't be alone again.